Welcome to the show Gold Squadron Gays. It's the podcast where two Star Wars loving gays talk about and review their favorite Star Wars content while also being gay as hell. I'm your host, Bradley Brower.
I'm your other host, Charles Rogers, and I only cried 4 times while watching this movie. Only 4. I'm very impressed with myself.
You know what? That's actually pretty good.
It's pretty good for this movie. This is a surprisingly affecting movie. I sat down to watch it and I went, this is going to be fun and entertaining. And then about 30 minutes in, I was actively weeping.
You know, it's funny. I sat down, I watched it with my sister because she just happened to be there. And I was like, oh, do you want to watch this movie with me? I'm watching for the podcast. And she was like, yeah, sure. I love this movie or whatever. And I was like, how do you remember this movie? You were like young or whatever when this came out. And she goes, I was born the year it came out.
So this is an audio only medium, so you can't see the video, but my reaction to that, the dead air that you heard for a second was me physically turning my chair around to be away from the microphone.
You're crying for a fifth time.
Now I have to readjust my position to the microphone. Dear
Crying
Lord. For a fifth time because of how old I am. I was wondering when this movie came out.
I guess I could double check.
Yes, you could
just to be a responsible reporter, whatever. Yeah, 2002. So this movie came out in 2002.
First of all, we should probably say what the movie is. We're talking about Treasure Planet, by the way.
Yes. Today we're covering Treasure Planet, a film Disney came out with in 2002.
Not a Star Wars thing.
Not a Star Wars
thing. By extreme popular demand.
Correct.
Many listeners reached out to me and asked us to do Treasure Planet.
Yes.
So,
and you
see, I almost corrected myself. Yeah, because Skeleton Crew. Because we've just finished Skeleton Crew.
Correct.
And it's Skeleton Crew is half a Treasure Island riff, so we decided to watch Treasure Planet. I also watched Treasure Island, the 1990 version of Treasure Island. Completely unrelatedly. We'll come back to animation in a second, but I do want to say this. So I've been on a Black Sails journey.
Yes.
Because Black Sails rules. Thank you to everyone for the last 10 years who has insisted I watch this. Black Sails rules. It genuinely is as good as everybody says it is. I am riveted to the screen the entire time. It's insane how good this show is. I cannot believe they got away with this in the 2010s, I think, or the late 2000s when this show came out. It's really fucking good. Anyway, I've been watching along for what had come out of Genders, Queers, and Buccaneers, which is Andy, who was our guest in episode 3's Black Sails podcast. So I would watch an episode of Black Sails, and then I would listen to their podcast. Between seasons 2 and 3, they covered Treasure Island the 1990 version.
Okay.
Because it's specifically the one that's the most faithful to the book. Some scenes are verbatim, word for word, the book. So I actually went into Treasure Planet with the context of 3 days prior, having watched Treasure Island 1990. And we will talk about some of my thoughts about the adaptational choices.
First of all, I guess I'll say, yes, Treasure Planet is a adaptation of Treasure Island. It follows loosely the exact plot of the Treasure Island. It's just vaguely set in space.
it was the big film that Musker and Clements wanted to make for an extended period of time. They kept pitching it to, I can't remember if it was Katzenberg or Eisner that they kept pitching it to.
Okay.
And basically Disney kept being like, this sounds kind of dumb. To quote Lindsay Ellis's recap of the situation, this sounds kind of dumb.
It does. Actually, on paper, it actually does sound kind of dumb if you think about it. Like, you're kind of like Treasure Planet in space. Or Treasure Island in space. Ugh, I don't know if I like that. Yeah.
Well, now we've had 2 versions of Treasure Island in space, and they both rule.
I love that.
So, but then they made them go make, I think Hercules was one of the films that they made them go make. But they were basically like, we need you to make 2 or 3 films that are huge box office smash hits, and then we'll let you make your dumb little Treasure Island in space movie, I guess.
Well, do you want a quick little fact? I just pulled up the wiki on this, and it's actually so funny. So this is the 3rd adaptation of Treasure Island that Disney had produced at the time. So the first one was 1950 Treasure Island they made. And then in 1996, they made Muppet Treasure Island. And
the best Treasure Island. Yes.
And then 2002, they came out with Treasure Planet, which is now its quote unquote third adaptation of this movie. So they had already made the story twice theoretically, right? So I could see the hesitation of being like, oof, we got to do this a third time, you know? Like, I don't know if that's a good idea. To go back, I want to say, I just think that this movie held up really well, right? So what was it? They also did, I believe that the two that they did, they worked on The Little Mermaid and Hercules were the two other movies
Yes,
that they
those were
worked
the
on.
two movies that they basically told them, nah, go make these movies. And then they kept going back and being like,
Right.
can we please make Treasure Island in space? And Disney was like,
Correct.
we kind of need you to make us a whole bunch more money hand over fist.
So what I was going to say about the animation was interesting because this came out during a time where this new animation style was being introduced, which was the 2D set atop a 3D computer animation. So it was like traditional animation mixed with the 3D animation style. There's a couple movies that do this. You might remember those being mostly DreamWorks movies back in the day, the 2D DreamWorks animation movies, which were like Prince of Egypt, El Dorado, and I believe Sinbad. I don't know if that was DreamWorks or not, but Sinbad follows a similar kind of animation style of this. But they were just like the way that it incorporates the 3D with the 2D is so interesting. Because it looks classic 2D for most of the movie, and then you see stuff like, you know, the ship, or you'll see like special effects or something. They always go into this weird 3D thing.
You can always tell
Yeah.
with movies produced around this period. You can always sort of tell. Anime's the same way. Even in the
Mm,
modern day, if it's bad, if it's not good, you can always tell whenever something's like over a 3D background or it's 2D characters over 3D or there's like the main characters are like 3D and the background characters are 2D and it looks really weird. You can always tell when it's
right.
done badly. This movie looks really good, even with the early, like, because it's so subtle.
Also, another random fun fact, just to Star Wars related. It looks like it came out 2 weeks before Attack of the Clones.
Oh, that might explain some of why it did not do well at the box office.
Right. So it looks to be that it premiered November 6, 2012, and just to double check when Attack of the
When did Attack
Clones
of the Clones
came
come out?
out. Oh, it says May 2002. So May 12th. Wait, when did this come out? May 3rd. This came out in November 6th. Oh, Paris. Wait, November 27th. Wait, why does it say 2 weeks? Oh, never mind. Attack of the Clones, I think, had a trailer for Treasure Planet in it when it was
Okay.
released. I think that's what they're trying to say in this. So during the theatrical whatever, it put it in Spider-Man OG Spider-Man movie, and then Attack of the Clones. I think it was the teaser trailer was in there.
I remember
If
the
you went and saw it.
days when you like for something like The Phantom Menace,
Hmm.
you would buy a movie ticket to a movie. This was the days before YouTube, the days before you could just watch a trailer online. If you wanted to see a trailer, you had to find out what movie it was attached to,
Right. Yeah, yeah,
buy a
yeah.
ticket for that movie, and there were people who would go in, watch the Phantom Menace trailer, and leave,
That's hilarious.
which
Uh,
is amazing and would never happen today.
okay, here's the box office information for your curiosity sake.
Okay,
Treasure Planet grossed over 12 million on its debut weekend, ranking at fourth place behind Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets,
fuck
uh,
J.K. Rowling,
James Bond's Die Another Day, and
fuck
then
Amazon.
Disney's own The Santa Claus 2.
Okay,
And it came out during Thanksgiving holiday weekend, you know, so because obviously that's when you do animated movies usually.
right.
So it grossed 38.1 million domestically, 71 internationally for a 109 million worldwide. Its failure became apparent early on as Disney's distribution arm reduced its fourth quarter earnings by 47 million within a few days of the film's release.
Yeah, this movie did not do well
Los Angeles Times said it was the most expensive box office failure of all time at the time.
at the time. Yep.
That's crazy
Can
because
you tell? Can you tell, guys, that Bradley did all the research and I just watched the movie and
just
cried?
watched it lovingly and you're just like, this is
I
great.
just watched it lovingly because I was alone in the apartment. It was the evening, so all the lights were down, and I just sat there and watched the movie.
So I think at the time, maybe they just weren't ready for it because this movie is so good that it
It's
hurts me.
insane how good this movie turned out to be.
Like even just as a standalone property, franchise, whatever you want to call it, it's as a book adaptation essentially. This movie is so good that it's better than most movies that come out now.
I having watched Treasure Island 1990 and kind of knowing the plot of the book.
Yeah,
This movie, every adaptational choice that they made in this movie was like a note perfect adaptational choice. Like it either simplified the plot to avoid kind of unnecessary characters or unnecessary plot divergences, or it was doing it to allow us more time with Jim and Silver, which is the core of this film.
right.
All the parts that I cried at pretty much were scenes between Silver and Jim. And like Silver, this might be the adaptation of Treasure Island that I've seen in recent
Right.
memory that got Long John Silver the most compelling because it's for kids. We have to clearly communicate like his internal turmoil. They do such a good job. The animators do such a good job with him, and the voice actor does such a good job with him that you do really feel his struggle over the course of this film. And like when he makes his final choices, when they're inside Treasure Planet at the end of the movie. By the way, we're going to spoil the fuck out of this movie.
Yeah.
Spoilers
If
for
you
a
haven't,
23-year-old movie,
yeah,
and
I was gonna say
also
if you
a
haven't watched a
book
23-year-old movie at this
from
point,
a century ago.
right, stop
But
what the podcast right now and go watch the movie and then come back.
actually, genuinely go watch the movie and then come back.
Yeah,
When he makes his final choice, like it doesn't feel like it comes out of nowhere. It doesn't feel like it's hackneyed at all. Like, and that's because they spent all this time with Silver and Jim. They really understand this is the emotional center of the film. And so part of how they accomplished that was they did a lot of cutting of
yeah,
characters and plot lines that weren't really relevant. And
okay,
also because this is a Disney flick and we have to move pretty quickly. Like
right,
Dr. Doppler, I think is the character's name.
uh-huh,
Uh,
for the
Dr.
yeah.
Dr. Doppler is actually a composite character.
Oh, okay,
In the original, there's two characters. It's Doctor. Let me pull up his name actually, because I don't want to misspeak on the podcast.
of course not.
I want to get all of my facts correctly. Dr. Livesey is the character who most resembles Dr. Doppler, who, fun fact, in the 1990 movie is played by General Veers, actor Julian Glover,
Oh, okay,
which is very fun. But he's a composite with a character named Squire Trelawney, who is basically the guy who pays for the expedition to Treasure Island. And they've composited them into one character
right, because he
so
also
that Jim
pays
can
for the
have
thing.
more
Yeah.
screen time. So
Mm,
now, because Trelawney's entire role in the plot of Treasure Island is really just to pay for the whole thing.
right, and
And
it makes
so
sense to combine that character
it
because
makes
like
sense to
it's not that
combine
serious.
them.
Yeah.
Like the attack on the inn in Treasure Island is done by a completely different character who's not Long John Silver, named
Okay.
Blind Pew, who, fun fact, in the 1990 movie is unrecognizably played. This is actually very impressive acting and like prosthetic work for 1990 that I would not have known this is who is playing that character in the 1990 film by Star Wars actor Sir Christopher Lee, who played Count Dooku.
Oh, another Star Wars connection.
Another Star Wars connection to the 1990 film.
I like that.
We do have a Star Wars connection to this film, but I don't know if we're going to bring him up. Corey Burton is in this movie because, of
Oh,
course, he
right,
is.
that's right.
He also played Count Dooku in the Clone Wars.
It's everything connects. The
Everything
threads of
connects.
life.
But like this choice to make it Silver who directly attacks and just have him shrouded in shadow, like again,
Right.
more of the Silver connection. And I really loved it a lot. There's also like when they get to the island, there's like an extended back and forth
Hmm.
where the pirates and kind of the good guys are fighting each other back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And like because we don't have those characters anymore, it's just the captain, Dr. Doppler, and Jim, and then they meet Ben on the planet. Because it's just them, it could be more about Jim going back and forth. Also, Jim
Right.
has been aged up in this.
Right. He's
He
like
has been
16 in
slightly
this
aged
film,
up.
I
He's like
think.
15 or 16
Yeah,
or
15 or
something.
16.
Where in the original, I think he's a little bit younger. So he gets to have more agency in this film, which I really liked a lot. And they also give him like a heartbreaking backstory
Yeah, let's Disney's like, here,
Let's
let me just
unpack this
give
for a
this
minute.
let's give our main character actual trauma by having his father abandon him as a kid.
And then we'll show it. We will show it
Then
on
we'll show
screen
a
with a
musical
cheesy
montage. Yes.
early 2000s pop montage, but it's over this scene of like Jim's dad abandoning the family.
Oh my God, it's so good.
It's
But it's
so
also
good.
so realistic in the concept of the story, right? Like, so his dad clearly is some kind of sailor or whatever, right? Some kind of person who has to constantly work jobs that take him away from his family.
For
And
years at a time.
right. And so what I'm assuming, because we don't actually get like an explanation in the film, but what I assume is that his father didn't, I don't know if his father necessarily intended to not come back. I think it would have, it's one of those things where like his dad left when he was young, but didn't come back because he died. So
That is
that's
one thing.
my one theory, but
The importance to the story is that his dad left and never came back, and
right,
Jim feels
exactly.
abandoned by him. Which, also, side note, I do have to say that Jim Hawkins' mom, who is
Yes,
played by Laurie Metcalf, gets so much more to do in this movie than the 1990 Treasure Island that I watched.
I love that.
Like, she's a really compelling character in this movie, even though she's like not in it after 25 minutes. She's barely in it. Like we get her in flashback, and then when they return, like she has such a pivotal role in this movie, which is actually really impressive that they gave her like more to do. She has an absolutely heartbreaking conversation with Doppler
Right.
where Jim is like listening from the roof and she's talking about like really struggling to raise like this delinquent kid and while also trying to run the inn by herself and like she's having financial struggles. I'm like, girl, why is this so compelling?
I don't know. I mean, I was actually just looking to see if this movie passes the Bechdel test.
It
Just real
does
quick.
not. It super does not.
Well, it technically says that in the beginning, Sarah Hawkins says a few short words to Mrs. Dunwoody in the very beginning. Not sure if that counts though, because all she says is Mrs. Hawkins, and then she says my juice, and
I
then
don't count
Sarah
that.
says, "Yes, I'll be right there."
Actually, talking of women, they switch up the gender of the captain
Yes.
who in Treasure Island is a man, Captain Smollett,
Okay.
and in this is woman, Captain Amelia, played by Emma Thompson.
Which one, love, first of all. She's
Love.
one of the best
She's
characters, actually.
brilliant in this movie.
But my question of that is, if that's true, if the original captain was a man, did they just change it for the cheap joke at the end that they have kids? Like,
I
I
I'm
don't know
not
what the
sure
purpose
why they
is.
changed it. I do like that they changed the captain to be a woman
Sure.
because the story needed more women in
Well,
it.
there's only two women in
The
the whole
original
entire film. Yeah.
the
So
original book is a sausage fest to an absurd
correct.
degree because
It
once they
does
get
make
on the
sense.
boat, there are no women in the plot. So
Right.
they did kind of need one. One of my very few criticisms of the movie, and I get that it was the early 2000s, I don't love that she's set up to be hyper competent in the first two acts, and then once she gets injured in act
Mm,
three, never really gets to do anything after
right. She's
that.
used, quote unquote, useless, and after that, yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the points that I was like, this movie has aged a little bit. But I did like that she was portrayed as very competent in the first two acts of the movie, right before
No,
she
for
does
sure.
get injured in the escape from the ship.
Right.
But yeah, they have this sort of weird romance subplot going on with her and the
Yeah.
doctor, and
I feel like that's something that all these movies did.
that's something they had to throw in.
They always do that. They always, because it does make me mad though that she is this super competent character, and then at the very end, she has to be domesticated in some way of
Oh
having
yes.
kids. Like,
She clearly that has to be where her arc ends is she has found a man and therefore can settle down.
also, can we talk about how she's even able to have these weird hybrid
No.
babies of three
No.
cats and a
We
dog? Like, what?
cannot talk about this. We cannot talk about the cat
What?
and dog babies.
What the
We
fuck is
cannot
that
talk
at the
about the
end?
cat and dog babies. We have to, I cannot get into the genetics of how all that would.
Only the girls are cats, and the one boy is a dog. Or I guess he's a dog. I don't really know what alien species Doppler is, but I'm assuming it's dog-like because in the beginning, when Jim's mom is serving him food, he says Alpo, or like it's like the brand of, or whatever he says is like
Well, he
Alponian.
serves it in a bowl,
A
like in
dog
a
bowl,
dog
right?
bowl.
But it's called Alponian, which is Alpo is a dog brand food. So I just find that funny. Like, and I was just like, okay, so he's clearly some kind of dog alien. Speaking of aliens, I did want to bring this up. Every single character in this movie is pretty much, for the most part, an alien, aside from Jim and his mom, and maybe Silver. He's technically a cyborg, but I'm not really lumping him in with the humans because he's very unhuman-like, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
he's it's hard to tell if he was human prior to becoming a cyborg
right. I
or
can't really tell,
not.
but every other character is an alien slash or a robot randomly. Like, they are all alien-like, which is A, probably why this has never gotten a live action remake, and then B, because
Yeah, because you'd just be animating it
you'd be
again with
animating
some
the whole thing.
15-year-old
Right.
there carrying the entire emotional weight of the plot.
Exactly.
Also, if you did a live action version of this, like I know we've said we kind of want a live action version of this. Rewatching the movie, I feel like it would just be Star Wars.
It would, because if you did it the way I want to do it, like no budget, like whatever, like we're not playing well that crap. The way I would want to do this movie, I would do all the aliens practical. I
Yeah,
would
that
do
would just be Star Wars.
it would be. And unfortunately, which is like, but it would be so good. I mean,
Some
it would just
movies,
look so cool.
I'm of the opinion that some movies do need a live action like
Yeah,
take on them. Not a shot by shot remake that's bullshit, but like a live action. Atlantis the Lost Empire needs a
yes,
live action version. Like it is the only
100%.
Disney film that they actually actively should make a live action version of
I
this
agree.
movie. Like this one I was kind of like, yeah, I think I'd really like one, and now having watched it again recently, I'm like, no, the animation's just so breathtaking in this movie.
I still want it.
You still kind of want it?
Well, I want it because actually I was, when I was looking at the what is it, the theatrical release and all that stuff, like the box office stuff, it did say that when this movie originally came out, they were planning on doing a sequel, but because the year before Atlantis came out, also box office failure. Surprise, surprise, because both these movies have a cult following for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm in the cult following for
I'm in the
Atlantis the
cult.
Lost Empire. I fucking love that movie.
No, these movies, because something about these movies,
That
they're
movie is part of
sisters,
why my
right?
type is the way it is,
Yes.
right? We
No.
need to acknowledge, Bradley, how much throughout my adolescence, from
Yes.
age 4 or 5 to about age 15 or so,
Hmm.
14 or 15, that the various men that were the lead characters in Disney movies fundamentally shaped my type as I became a teenager.
Yeah.
We need to talk about how
Oh,
much, because between this movie, Atlantis the Lost Empire, that explains why I was interested in a lot of the
yes.
men I was interested in high school and early college.
Well, that's because Jim Hawkins is hot. I mean,
For a
unobjectively.
15-year-old, I will very quickly
Oh, we were young when the
very,
movie came out. It's fine.
we were young when the movie came out. We are talking in the context
Yes.
of how we were viewing the movie at
Yes.
age 12 or so when the movie came out.
Right. We
Yes,
didn't know it at the time, but
to a
yes.
12-year-old gay boy, he
Yes.
is very hot.
Very hot.
As an adult, no, that is a child.
Obviously. But yeah.
Obviously. As a 12-year-old gay boy, yes, that is
Yes.
an
I
extremely
could
attractive
see,
animated character.
correct. I could see why my types are the way they are, or like just like the evolution of hot, quote unquote, hot characters in Disney movies, where you're like, oh, that's why I'm attracted to the lion in The Lion King 2. Like, that's why Kovu's hot.
Oh, I get it now. I
I get it
understand.
now. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How many
So,
of us
no,
how many of us had our like types shaped by Disney movies in the late 90s and early 2000s? I have to wonder.
I'm sure there's someone could write an actual like thesis on
No, because
this.
every time I see Milo Thatch again, I'm like,
Yes,
"Oh, that explains a lot of
a
things.
lot.
That explains a lot of things."
No, and those, and I agree with you. I think those two movies for sure I think they should be made, honestly. Like, whether or not they do well, clearly Disney has a hard on for live action remakes right now. So, like, you know what? Fuck it. Like,
Because we
I'd
gotta
like to feed
retain
into it.
that copyright.
No,
We
I'd love
gotta
for
keep
them to
that
feed into that.
copyright.
I agree. Because I wouldn't, let's see, if this came out in 2002, when would the copyright expire? What is it, 50 years, right?
Life of the author plus 70 years,
Oh,
I
plus
think
70.
50 or
Oh, okay.
70. Like
Okay.
it's something ridiculously long.
Okay, interesting. Well, oh, I guess that makes sense why they did Snow White. But okay. But anyway,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um,
Is this slew of live action
what's
remakes
the
starting to
oldest
make
thing? Yeah,
sense?
look at their oldest stuff, and then that's what the next
It's Snow
remake could
White.
be. Right.
It's Snow White. Well, no,
Exactly. Well, Winnie
Mickey
the Pooh was,
Mouse.
and then Steamboat
Mickey
Willie. Yeah, yeah,
Mouse
yeah.
was the oldest, and I think Mickey might have entered the. No, I don't think Mickey's entered the public. The original Steamboat Willie has entered the
Correct.
public
That one
domain.
has entered. Yes, the
The
classic
original
remake or
Steamboat
whatever of him
Willie
has not. No.
has entered the public domain.
Correct. That's why there's going to be a Steamboat Willie horror movie apparently coming out
Because that's the
soon,
first fucking thing you do with a wholesome thing that enters the public domain.
which makes no
You
sense, but whatever.
immediately make a horror movie of it because
A
it's
crappy horror
fucking
movie, by the
stupid. Yes,
way.
they're all bad. They're always bad.
They're
They're
always bad.
always terrible.
Um,
None of them are good.
no, they're terrible. But we got.
Watch me find out some friend of mine worked on one of them.
I want to bring it to back to Star Wars for a second, just to see like some of the comparisons and some of the things I noticed when I was watching the movie
Yeah, because
that
we are
may or may
ostensibly a
not
Star
be
Wars podcast.
correct. Yeah, we should probably talk a little bit about Star Wars.
We should
I
probably mention Star Wars at some point on here.
This may or may not be references or things that they took from this movie, but everything's a reference to everything now, so it doesn't really matter. Like nothing is original. Don't worry, like if it's not actually a connection. I'm just saying it is visually similar, so therefore it is probably the same. The
We started with a doomed Yowie story in ancient Mesopotamia, and we have just been
right.
riffing on that for the last several thousand years.
Exactly. Really, anytime you talk about just the hero's journey in general, like it's the Odyssey, we get it. Like just we don't have to like go over and over. Like they're all the same thing, just change the details of the story. Like that's all it is. Uh,
You're just doing the Iliad again.
exactly.
We know we're just doing the Iliad again. We know we are just doing Gilgamesh again.
Right.
We
So
understand.
when I
Doomed,
say
listen,
reference,
Doomed
that's what I mean.
Yahweh has been part of the cultural zeitgeist for the last several thousand years. We get it. The odd parts of the Odyssey are just a riff on earlier stuff. Anyway, sorry, nothing is original, and we're going to talk about
Nothing is
Star
original,
Wars.
so let's talk about Star Wars. So there's a couple things. One is what I think is the most obvious reference slash thing that I noticed, which was the star map, which was the ball or whatever star map, which it was in Ahsoka. She had a very similar map ball
I don't know if we
thing.
mentioned that, but yeah, you're right.
I think we did very briefly, but I know that's clearly like I think that's the biggest thing in this movie that was referenced and or maybe a reference. I don't know if the creators came out and said that yes, this is a Treasure Planet reference. However, I don't know if this is also the first time that a star map that was in an orb has necessarily been seen in media before. But however, the star map in the orb where the comes out as like a hologram and whatever, that may be a new thing that was invented for this movie. And Ahsoka definitely borrowed, if not directly references that. I thought that was interesting. The other thing was space whales.
There was that random scene of space
There's a
whales.
random
There's a
scene of
random
space
fucking
whales.
scene of Jim Hawkins like on
Hmm.
the rigging of the ship, and they fly into a pod of
Amazing.
space whales. I actually remember I
Hmm.
thought about writing that down to bring up, so I'm glad you brought it up to where it was. I literally sat up and was like, "Is that the fucking Purrgil?"
I mean, they don't look exactly the same, but I
But
mean,
they're basically the same as the
basically the
Purrgil.
same. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
they don't explain them at all. But one thing I do like in this movie that they didn't really talk about or reference is the I guess they're visually supposed to represent seagulls, but they're some kind of space like creature, right? That flies in space next to the whales. They're smaller white. They're supposed to be like seagulls, but they're not seagulls, obviously. But they're like more like manta rays, which I thought was very visually interesting. Like I don't know, it's something that I just thought was really cool that I want to see more of, maybe even in Ahsoka, honestly. Like I want to see something like that. But that was all I really saw that was like really stood out. But there was one more thing. I guess it's not Star Wars related, but the door that they use to travel between the different planets or whatever is
Right.
very Stargate SG-1, like,
Wow, that's a
you know,
deep cut.
yeah.
That's
So
a deep cut.
I really liked that because it just, I mean, I know visually it's not the same because obviously there's more like an ancient gate, but I think in the context of this story, they don't really explain it. But I think that the captain stumbled upon this technology. I don't think he created it. I think it was some kind of ancient thing that he found and utilized to get the treasure or whatever over time. And
Yeah,
so,
they set up a weird like it's really good script writing because they set up a
mhm,
weird little mystery in the
right.
the very opening scene of the film. They set up a really weird mystery of like how did Captain Flint manage to appear and disappear and collect all this treasure? And at the when I first watched it because I kind of forgot where the plot was going, I
Right.
was like, yeah, they're never really going to explain that. It's just a mysterious. No, they absolutely do explain that. Like
Exactly.
that is actually a central piece of the mystery is how did he manage to do all of this? We do find
Right.
out by the end of the movie how Flint managed to just sort of appear and disappear the way
Which
he
is great.
did so that he could
Right.
rob these ships. Did slightly make me insane. So in the original novel Treasure Island, Captain Flint is never named, like first named. He's
Sure.
just called Captain Flint. So adaptations get to make up their own
Hmm.
first name for him. And I've been watching Black Sails, a
Okay.
beautiful show that has me super invested in Flint specifically. I feel about Captain Flint the way that I kind of feel about the people on Temptation Island, which is to say, you are a horrible person doing horrible things, but I'm so like invested in your character. But also, unlike the people on Temptation Island, who are awful. Captain Flint does have a tragic backstory, and I do sympathize with his motivation. I also think he's correct to burn down all of civilization, but we can't get into that right now. In the original novel, Captain Flint does not have a first name, and in this movie, they give him the first name Nathaniel. And
Hmm.
because I've been watching Black Sails, and his first name is James, every time they call him Captain Nathaniel Flint, I'm like, no, his first name is James. That is Captain James Flint. He is played by Poseidon, and he has a really spoilery backstory that I don't want to say because I'm going to try to talk Bradley into watching the show, and I don't want to give away what Captain Flint's backstory in the show is, specifically because that's what I want Bradley to watch the show for. But his name is not Nathaniel, so I had to kind of get over that as I watched
Right, right,
this
right.
movie. I was like, that's not his name.
Also, the character design too, I really liked for Flint. He's
Uh,
got six eyes and he looks like, I mean, the alien design in this movie, I want to give them props. Every single alien is different. They have a different design. There's no like, they have this one vague alien that they use as like their kind of like general alien. It's kind of this frog-like looking thing.
right.
But for the most part, there's a rock man, a cat, a dog, a shapeshifter, a literal fart slug, like a praying
They have
mantis
a fart
crab.
slug for
Like
some
there's
reason.
so many things in this movie that
So,
they're so good. All these designs.
so Bradley, I have some trivia for you
Oh, okay.
because I watched the 1990 movie and I would not have known this if I did not recently watch Treasure Island.
Hmm.
Scroop, who is the lobster man,
Yes.
the creepy lobster
The
man,
praying mantis crab thing.
in the original Treasure Island, that is a character named Israel Hands,
Okay.
who is a real actual pirate who existed.
Oh, okay.
Just randomly is in Treasure Island. If you
Love
watched
that.
Our Flag Means Death, Izzy Hands, yeah, this is that guy.
And then also, I know this is you said the character of Billy Bones was also in
He's
Flint,
also
right?
he's in the book. Yes, he's also in Black Sails.
He's a turtle in this one, but
He's a turtle in
a
this.
turtle man
Uh
or a
yeah,
turtle-like man.
he's also in the book. They play him much more sympathetically than the 1990 movie. He's kind of obnoxious in the 1990 movie.
Okay.
This one I sort of feel bad when he croaks and dies.
Yeah, because he's just like an
The
old man in
1990
this one.
movie,
Yeah.
he dies and I'm like, yeah, you kind of got what was coming to you.
And then the most interesting character that is not really interesting, but I find interesting because I had the Happy Meal toy as a kid, is Morph, the quote unquote parrot analog of,
Yeah,
the movie.
he's the in the original Treasure Island, Silver has named his parrot Flint.
Okay.
Hmm.
So he's just like
And
the parrot
so,
character.
yeah, he's the parrot character
Got it.
that defects to
Yes.
Jim
Our
Hawkins'
hero.
side.
I love it. He's so
Do
cute.
do you want to very briefly talk about some of the cast members we have not
Oh yeah.
By the way, this movie's stacked.
Oh
So
yeah. Who haven't we
I think
talked about?
Bradley only wrote down a couple. We haven't done who is voicing. We're not gonna run through their resumes
No,
because
but you could read them down the list if you want.
but just a couple of the highlights who voice characters that I have not previously mentioned. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is actually the voice of Jim Hawkins, which was very surprising to me. Brian Murray absolutely carries this whole fucking movie on his and Joseph Gordon-Levitt's shoulders
Hmm.
as the voice of John Silver. All the voice cast is very good, but those two are absolutely like carrying the whole movie. Like it's insane how good both of those characters are. David Hyde Pierce is the voice of Dr. Doppler, and Martin Short is the voice of Ben, who is the Ben Gunn character in this.
I will say, if this movie ever did get a live action remake, I would just have Martin Short come back and do the voice of Ben again. I wouldn't even change
Yeah,
the character.
I wouldn't change that at all. I'd have
I
that be the
wouldn't.
obligatory.
There's
We're
no
bringing
need
the
to.
same.
It's so funny. And he's just like so out there of a character. Like now I don't know like I don't know how close it is to the actual adaptation of
It's
this
pretty fucking
crazy
close.
kind of, demented character of some kind.
Yeah, no, they're actually pretty fucking close
Yeah.
to the Ben Gunn that was in Treasure
Hmm.
Island 1990.
Yeah.
They're actually pretty similar characters.
I love that.
Like, God, I loved this movie so much. The shot at the end where Jim looks out the window and you see Silver's face in the clouds, and I'm like, God, this movie got me. This
You know
movie
that
got me.
this movie is so emotionally like they're so good at that connection of emotion. Like I know all movies are technically supposed to do this, right? Like sometimes I watch a movie and I just kind of like watch it. I don't necessarily go like that made me feel something. You know what I mean? Like sometimes they're very shallow and
That's
they
me watching Temptation Island, except the thing I feel is blinding rage.
right, but my point is like you'll watch a movie. I think maybe that they've just gotten away from this, or maybe I'm just too jaded now to actually appreciate movies. But I feel like early 2000s slash 1990s movies were really good at that emotional pull, or like that was a main focus of animators back in the day. Of like, I'm talking just strictly animation movies. I'm not going to talk about regular movies,
Right.
but I feel like they just were really good at just pulling at your heart, like all of them. Like they were just really good at that.
Well, I will say that I think that that applies to like big budget movies that I've seen. I've seen some indie animation projects that like really got me. But it used to be that, you would get these creators like Musker and Clements who would make these passion projects with
Right.
like Disney money backing them. And that's part of the thing with this movie is you can kind of tell that some of the other Disney movies that they worked on, they weren't super invested in them. Like they were kind of doing them for the paycheck. Again, very similar to you in Temptation Island. They were very doing them for the paycheck.
Right.
And this one, it really feels like they loved this movie. They loved this concept. They really like put a lot of heart and thought and love into the movie. And I think that's why it elicits such an intense emotion is that you can tell when there's a piece of media that was made because they were checking boxes. They wanted to put something out, they need something for this quarter, and they put a movie out. And then you can also tell that, like, no, this is a movie that the creators really wanted to make. And
For sure.
looking at a movie like going into the live action world, looking into a movie like Wicked or Dune Part 2. And these are both movies that like the creators of the movie really wanted to make these movies. And they had huge budgets to do what they wanted, and what came of them really resonated with audiences because they had that passion for the movie that they were working on. Denis Villeneuve loves Dune. You can tell. John Chu loves Wicked. You can tell. But also, like, they're professionals. They're creative professionals. They understand how to make these movies in such a way that they're not just doing the original source material. They're twisting it, they're remixing it, they understand the medium of film. And this movie, Treasure Planet, really gave me that with Musker and Clements really understand animation. They really understand the emotion that animation can elicit from the audience. And they really worked to make sure Treasure Planet elicits that emotion. And that's why I cried multiple times when watching this movie. I'm not even joking. I actually did cry watching this movie. It was very emotional.
No, it's so good. And but like what's so funny about this, I love reading about this film because I'm like looking at all these things that I didn't know about it. And I'm reading all this stuff. Like they believed in this movie so much that they actually had a planned sequel and television series, which if you know anything about the history of these guys things, Hercules, Little Mermaid, both of those had television series. They may not have been as popular, but
Now,
they
were
had
Musker and
full
Clements going to be
animated.
involved in those
It says
projects?
that they had storyboards and concepts so that
Oh, interesting.
they were already that far into the process that they were thinking about it.
I kind
So
of like that didn't happen.
I do, but then when you
I'm
read what the
kind of
premise
okay.
is, I kind of like it.
What was the premise?
So it says in the sequel, Jim Hawkins and Kate, his love interest and classmate at the Royal Interstellar Academy, must team up with Long John Silver to stop the villainous Ironbeard from freeing inmates of a
Oh
prison
God, they were
asteroid.
doing Blackbeard. You know what? You know what?
I mean,
I don't love that sequel idea.
no.
I have some problems with it.
Even if
I would
the you know
I
who
would
the
have let
voice of Ironbeard was going to be?
who is the voice of Ironbeard going to be? Because this might sell me.
Willem Dafoe.
Why the fuck did this not happen?
Clearly he was signed on to do it apparently. So,
Why the fuck did this? No. All concerns about doing a sequel to Treasure Island aside, which I think no one should ever do.
right.
You should never ever do a sequel to Treasure Island. The story is fine. The ending works, even in the original. However, in this one case, if you were going to do Willem Dafoe the Blackbeard in space,
Right.
I would have been sat for that.
I think so.
Do you know who plays Blackbeard in Black Sails? This absolutely shocked me when
No.
he turns up. We've talked about him before, but he turned up the first time. Mild spoilers for
Oh
Black
wait, you did. I
Sails.
think you did say this earlier.
Blackbeard
Yeah, yeah.
does show up in the show. The actor who plays him would not have been my first choice, but every scene he's in is perfect.
Edward Teach, is that his name?
Edward teaches the guy's real name. Is
Right.
Blackbeard's real name.
Oh, that
That's
was
the character.
Blackbeard's real.
That
Oh,
was
that's the character's.
Blackbeard's real name was
Oh,
Edward Teach.
whoops.
Which, by the way, Black Sails never calls him Blackbeard. They always
Ray
refer to him as
Stevenson.
Teach. Ray Stevenson is the
Oh,
actor who
okay.
plays
I was like, why am I
Blackbeard in
saying
Black
this random?
Sails.
I'm like, I don't know who that is. Ray Stevenson. That's pretty good.
That's great casting. He's so menacing. Like,
That's really good. And there's another
anyway,
Star
I
Wars
can't.
connection.
Bradley, you should watch Black Sails.
I
You
guess
should
really.
watch the show. It's so good. It has Balin Skull in it as fucking Blackbeard. Please watch Black Sails. I am now firmly on the Black Sails evangelism train, and I haven't even finished the show. I'm midway through season 3. Their Long John Silver is perfect. The Luke something, I think, is Luke Arnold, I think is the name of the actor. Let me Google this really quick. It is, in fact, Luke Arnold who plays Blackbeard in, not Blackbeard, Long John Silver and Black Sails. Absolutely perfect. No perfect character. Like, the writing of him is beautiful. He's beautifully acted. Like, watch the show.
Okay, so I know this is just silly because my sister brought this up. This is the only reason why I'm doing this segment.
Okay.
Is because my sister was like, we were talking about if they made it into a live action, who would play Jim? And I was
Okay.
like, well, I thought about it and I was like, I don't really know any young actors under 25 that could play a 16-year-old right now. You know what I mean? Like it has to you have to have an age limit on this because you can't have Timothy Chalamet or Tom Holland play a fucking
You
16-year-old.
also
You know what I
you
mean?
also kind of want to cast him if you were doing a live action version and you're
Right.
the producer, given the situations that Jim finds himself in the course of this movie,
Hmm.
you maybe want to cast him around the 16, 17
Right.
year old mark. They kind of got away with it. Like you could get away with it in the original Treasure Island. I
Hmm.
don't know if you could get away with like casting too young for some of the situations in this movie.
No, that's why I said it has to be someone who's at least 20 years old to actually play a 16-year-old. You know what I mean? Like it has to be like in that. I think 20 to
Okay,
25
so
is a good age range.
Who were you thinking
Okay.
to play a
So
high schooler
I have a
at the age
couple.
of 20?
I narrowed it down to three
Okay.
because I'll do my least likely and then I'll go
Okay.
stronger as we go. So because I looked up lists of all these actors and stuff. So my
Okay.
first pick is from a terrible movie. I do not
I'm
recommend
gonna
it.
have to Google these.
Yes. Okay. So here's the first one. He's from the Shazam movie and he plays the younger Shazam.
Okay.
This is Asher Angel, is his name.
I do know this guy.
Okay. So I picked him
Yeah,
because
he would be fine.
he's young and he looks like, like he looks young. That's my kind of thing. Like he's not actually that young, but he could play 16 or something, right? So that's why I kind
Yeah,
of picked that.
he was born in 2008, so I think that makes him.
He that works. As long as you're before
I think that makes
or
him 17.
you have
Like
to be
he's
born in the
around.
2000s to be in this movie as Jim Hawkins. That's my rule.
He's around the right age.
Right. So he was my kind of third pick. He's not my first choice, but I thought he was young and he could grow into it for sure. So that's
25
one.
minus 8 is 17. Yes. So, yeah,
Now,
he's even around the right age to
right.
play Jim.
So the next one I have is shit. I don't even know his name. Fuck. That's embarrassing.
Good work, Bradley.
Let me pull up his show real quick.
We're
Um,
professional
I
podcasters,
know
by
we
the
really
way.
okay.
We've been doing this for over 3 years. We
Oh wait, I
definitely know
did
what
know
we're
his name because
doing.
I put it in my notes. I just had my notes hidden away. Okay, so next up is Tanner Buchanan from Cobra Kai.
Okay.
He's more like visually,
Oh, I would buy this.
yeah,
I would buy this.
uh-huh, yeah. I think he visually
Oh, the
looks
first
like
thing
him.
I
Like if we're
agree.
just going
I
based on
agree.
visual acting, I'm not going on acting ability. I'm going on just visual component.
Visually, does he look like? Yeah, he would make a
Mhm.
really good Jim Hawkins,
He would make
actually.
a really good Jim Hawkins. Now, I'm doing this third pick only because I want something different from a character. I chose Charlie Bushnell from Percy Jackson.
Perfect. Absolutely. Yeah, no, that one.
Yep.
That's the one.
He's
That's
young,
the
he's
one.
up and coming. You know what I mean? Like I
He has
feel like
emotional range, like he has the acting range to
Mhm.
be able to do it. Because, like, dear God, in Percy Jackson, even in season one, he's
Exactly.
doing an
So
insane amount of lifting.
he for me is like a really good just different choice. Like I want something like I'm not going based on just look alone, right? Because honestly, if you think about it, this movie I'm going based on just what the animation looks like, but this could be blind casting. There's no reason why it needs to look anything like the that we know animation wise because there's no like it doesn't have any basis in the story. Every other character is an alien. So he's just a
Right.
human character. He can be anything, right?
He
Like he
can
can
be
look like
anybody
anything.
you want. Yeah.
Right. So I think that I'm
Charlie
just
Bushnell
going
would make
with
a
this.
really good Jim Hawkins,
I
I
think
feel
so.
like.
Yeah. I fear I ate
All
with
the
that
others,
choice.
all I do fear you ate with that choice. Oh God. I always hated doing fan casting exercises. We
I
had to
know.
do an actual when I was before we met, back when I was at the other campus. We had to do a casting exercise as part of our classes, and I blanked. And very obviously, all my casting choices were from either Game of Thrones or Star Wars The Force Awakens.
Yes, 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 yes.
Because those were the only actors I could think of off the top of my head
I
at
like
the
low
time.
key, like I would love to like low key get into actual movie casting or TV show casting only because I just find it so fascinating. I don't necessarily think I'm good at it or I have the skills to do it. However, I find like I know what I like and I know what I want from an actor slash everything. Like I feel like
Right.
I want to do it just to like try it out. But something like this where like, oh, cast, your movie, like if I were like, for example, if Lucasfilm, I don't know, felt the need to make a Phasma movie and let, people cast it other than Gwendolyn Christie.
Obviously,
Um,
Gwendolyn Christie would play Captain Phasma. Yes.
oh, well, obviously, that's a given. But the other characters, I mean, like I would love to start going down the list, try to do Captain Cardinal or like just like some of the more interesting characters in that I would love to see, and then like bring back some people who we already
Captain
know.
Cardinal, Vi Marati,
I would
Brindle
love to cast
Hux, although we
Vibrati.
already
We're
have a
doing
Brindle Hux.
right. Well, I guess yeah,
This is
I would well
older Brindle Hux, though.
older, right? Because I would bring. I think it's his dad, right?
That's his dad.
Yeah. So I think that you could probably recast, but
I've always thought of him as Brendan Gleeson.
yeah,
That's who Brindle Hux has always been. Like First Order era Brindle Hux
mm,
has always been Brendan Gleeson
yeah.
in my head.
I mean, and then of course he'll bring what is it? Is his Dommel? He would come back anyway because he's in
Domal
like
Hill is
yeah,
as Armitage Hux.
right. So he
Well,
would
this
come
is a
back and
younger Hux, so you could cast some demon twink in the role.
or does he have a brother or something or like a
His brother
sibling?
plays his brother plays Brendel Hux in The Mandalorian.
Okay. So then I
Yeah.
would just probably just do that, honestly. I'd keep that,
No,
honestly.
I
But yeah.
I was blanket casting. I'm terrible at it because I've gotten the occasional people will talk to me about like Beach House Studios and be like, if you were going, do you have any like fan
Right,
casts for
right,
your own
right, right,
characters?
right.
I'm like, no.
No.
I don't think about that. Like, I have never thought of this in my brain, and also I'm really bad at this. Like, no, I could
Mhm.
not tell you. I have a couple of voice fan casts of people that they sound like in my head, but like, no, I can't do this because I'm terrible at it.
Now, I will say, my sister did want me to say this part. When I was telling her my fan cast, she said, well, why wouldn't you pick Walker Scoble to be the Jim Hawkins? And I said, no, 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 he can't be because I'm saving him for Atlantis as Milo Thatch
Isn't
when
he a
he gets a little
little,
older. No, when he
and it
gets
gets a
older.
little older.
Yeah,
Okay.
because
Good
it's
thought.
because they're probably not
Good
going to make
thought.
it now. I feel like by the time he's old enough to play it, like they will make it. So therefore, he'll be old enough and he'll have more of an acting experience doing this whole entire Percy Jackson series that they'll trust him enough to take
To
on that
give him
role.
Milo Thatch. Yes.
Exactly.
I can see it. I see the vision.
The
I see the
vision. You got to
vision.
have a vision.
I see the vision. Bradley, do you have any final notes on Treasure Planet that you want to go over before we sort of dive into final thoughts on this movie?
My final note is Rip Mr. Arrow, one of the most unnecessary
Rip.
deaths in in animation history. Um, Putting someone like that, just throwing them into a black hole.
It's even worse in the 1990 Treasure Island adaptation. They just randomly toss him over the side of the ship and it never becomes relevant to the plot again.
Damn.
It's crazy.
Okay.
My final thought on Treasure Planet is if you have not recently rewatched Treasure Planet, you should rewatch Treasure Planet. It is good. It is a very excellent movie that was crafted with a lot of love, and the parts of it that do not hold up in 2025 are relatively minor.
Yeah, they're not
I
that bad.
found there's some Disney movies that I watch even from the 2000s, and I'm like, this was a choice.
Yeah.
This was a choice that you made. Not this one. They're relatively minor. I still found it to be a very enjoyable movie. I cried. It made me cry at a early 2000s like pop ballad.
Yeah.
I don't know how the movie pulled that off, but the movie pulled that off.
I don't honestly, I don't know that this movie somehow is surprisingly good in the midst of the era that it came out. I do know that this was kind of during Disney's flop era, you could call it. They had movies
Which
like
is
were just
bullshit
not
because
great.
they made movies that were also really great and they also flopped, which was very unfortunate, including
Yeah,
this
it's
movie.
weird. Yeah, they made good movies and bad movies during this time, and all of them seemed to flop, which was really weird because like you can compare I think like other movies that came out were like Home on the Range, Chicken Little, like random movies that are just not that good. Like, and then this is like mixed in there with it, and you're like, this is genuine gold. Like, how is this like bad? How did they hate Atlantis? How do they hate Treasure Planet? Like, makes no sense. But anyway, loved it.
Um, well, considering when this came out and when some of those other movies came out, this is the early 2000s. One, we're having a golden era for live action at that time.
Hmm.
This was a big burst of a lot of like really good, really well regarded live action movies, which The Lord of the Rings came out during this period. The Star Wars prequels, which say what you will about them at the time, and a lot of people did, and then a lot of people have forgotten that they did, but Pepperidge Farm remembers. I remember.
Rich Farm
I
remember.
remember what you fuckers said about the prequels back in 2004. I have not forgotten. You may want me to forget, but I have not forgotten. And it has to be said, fuck J.K. Rowling, but the Harry Potter movies were also coming out.
They were. And I think that was a
Because you
big because I
did,
think Chamber of Secrets came out the same year. And so like that's like
yeah.
a big deal at the time.
I
Although,
believe
yeah,
Attack of the Clones, Chamber of Secrets, and I do think Two Towers also came out
I'm looking, let's see, Lilo and
in
Stitch,
2002. Yeah, Lilo and Stitch.
Spider-Man,
It's a big year
28
for
Days
movies.
Later,
Big year
Two
for movies.
Towers, Catch Me
Okay,
If
I
You
was right.
Can, Chamber of Secrets, Signs, live action Scooby-Doo, um,
Crazy year for movies that this
Chicago,
movie was being dropped into.
The Ring. I mean, like Resident Evil, The Bourne Identity,
Mm.
Ice Age. There's so many movies, random movies that came out during like good movies. So this was actually a year for film, which is
I was
interesting how
I was
crazy that
gonna
is.
say that I thought it might have been an early warning sign for the economic recession that was going to come up
Hmm.
in a couple of years. I don't actually, I've revisited that since we looked at how many movies came out that year. I just think the year was that this time period, and that was just 2002.
Right. Yeah,
This
I'm only
time
looking at
period
2002.
was so stacked
Well, and it's weird
with
because
movies.
if you think about it, what was happening in the world, obviously,
The Iraq War had really
right,
was
the
really
terrorist
kicking
attack,
off
nine
in
11 happened right
2001.
before this. So like that's
Mhm.
crazy. Like that we had all these like amazing movies come out like a year, later after that. And I remember because they actually changed the animation in Lilo and Stitch because there was a part of the movie where he steals a plane and then it flying it through the city and they had to change it.
They airbrushed the Twin Towers out of
Yeah.
Spider-Man,
Oof. Yeah. See,
and
like,
this was a time before you could very easily go in and do that.
right. Oh, I
They
love
actually
when
had
you
to
can
put in
see
the
that in movies.
work.
Yeah, when
They
you look at
they
movies and you're like, "Oh, look, it's the Twin Towers in the background." Like it's such an odd thing to see, but then like it's just weird. Anyway, I don't want to get into that, but
Yeah, this
yeah.
movie is very important to keep in the context of when it actually came out.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting that
It
all
came
these
out in
movies
an
came out.
absolutely stacked year of
Stacked
just
year.
a ton of movies
So many movies that are
that were
all
coming out.
really good of their own right. In all different genres and categories. Like there's adventure movies, there's comedies, there's like tons of movies that came out, and they're all like in their field, like of their genre or whatever. They're all like the top, like what you would consider a quote unquote classic movie for a lot of these. So it's very interesting that all these movies came out in this stacked year. But otherwise, I think it did a decent job overall.
Well, that's all our many, many thoughts on Treasure Planet, the movie that we looked at because of Skeleton Crew.
Right. Are we ready to bury the pirates,
We're
lore,
ready to bury the
themes?
pirate, but
Uh-huh.
we're not quite done with tenuous connections to Skeleton Crew because we have 2 weeks to kill before Celebration. And
Oh,
last week I said, or 2 weeks ago, I said we were going to do a two-parter.
okay.
We did not do it because, again, I received many messages and comments asking for us to do an episode on Treasure Planet.
Right.
So we did Treasure Planet because I listen to our audience sometimes when
Sometimes.
they have a good point. I don't let the audience dictate the show to me, but this time they had a point. We did, I think, need to do
Right.
this episode. Next week we are going to start on a two-parter with a tenuous connection to Skeleton Crew,
Hmm.
basically to fill the time
Yeah.
because we're out of shows.
We are at a shows until celebration starts, so
We are out of shows till Celebration starts. So
got about
we're
a month.
gonna do
Yeah.
the two-parter next week. Come back next week to find out what we're doing
There you
on the
go.
show. I will tease for those in the know. This
Hmm.
is the only other hint I'm going to give to what we're going to be covering over the next 2 weeks. And it is going to be similar to this. It's just going to be a discussion. We're not going to do a deep dive for reasons that will become apparent when you find out what we're doing. There is an Easter egg reference to this in Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. So if you 100%ed Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga and you went and looked up all those Easter eggs, you might have figured out what we're talking about.
Oh, you'll have to bring it back up when we
I will.
cover it.
I will absolutely try to bring this back up.
Alrighty, because I'm gonna have to try to take notes on this some in some capacity,
Good
but we'll see.
fucking luck.
I don't know
I
how
am
detailed those notes are gonna be, but we'll see.
I am not doing notes on these. I am not trying to deep dive these. I'm just gonna let the experience
I think that's
wash over me.
I might take notes of
Like
like I want to mention this, but that's probably about it. I probably won't go farther than that.
that we've teased this long enough.
That's right.
You can find a whole host of reality TV that Bradley has worked on. We need him to keep being employed. We need him to keep making money. So I encourage you to watch most of these shows. Such wonderful shows as Married to Medicine, Queen's Court, The Circle on Netflix, which I did decide that I need to check out. I did decide after watching half of the next show that I'm about to mention that I don't want the only reality show that Bradley has worked on that I have watched to be motherfucking Temptation Island.
I love that.
I'm so glad that you got a paycheck for this show. And I'm also glad that you forced your PAs on it. Was this the one where you forced your PAs to go watch Phantom Menace with you?
Yes, this is that. This is
Okay.
that show. Yes.
This
To
is
be
that show.
fair, one out of the three or four that we took to the theater actually wanted to go because he's also a Star Wars fan. Shout out Nico. But I,
Shout out
I
to Nico for actually
uh,
wanting to go see the
yeah,
Phantom Menace.
he
I
really
hope you
wanted
had
to
a
go
good
see it,
time.
and he did. We were busting out laughing the whole time. We had such a great time. So do your pluggables and then we'll finish
I will do
up.
my pluggables now so we can finish, so I can get to the bank before it closes. You can also find me on the Star Wars TTRPG podcast For Light and Dice, a TTRPG actual play podcast set in the High Republic era, DM'd by Chris from Darkside Divas, who is unfortunately on a Temptation Island journey with me, as well as Hope from J Guys and Jedi, Jess from RuPalp's Podrace, Colton from Nerdsmith, and our friend Robin. You can also find queer mystery thriller books that I write. Those are currently on Amazon Kindle, but in the intervening time between last episode and this episode, I found out that it got stolen by Meta
How?
for their
Wait,
libgen database to train their AI. Because I sure as fuck did not
How
give
would
them
you
permission
figure
to
that
scrape
out, though?
this. They have a database. The Atlantic had like
Oh.
a searchable database. Allegedly got it from pirate sites and used that to scrape to train their AI. Allegedly.
Allegedly. Got it. Interesting.
Yes. That pissed me off enough that I've accelerated my plans to move it off Amazon exclusivity. So the first book leaves, I actually have dates. The first book leaves Amazon exclusivity April 24th. The second book leaves April 29th. The third book is going to leave 3 months after it releases, and none of the others will be Amazon exclusive. So these pluggables are going to change as to where you can purchase these books. I will keep the pluggables updated. I will probably just end up having a link tree or directing people to my personal website. You can also find me involved in the Star Wars fan-run Legends Convention, Legends Expo, that is in Burbank, California, September 13th and 14th. Tickets and information at legends-expo.com. All right, Bradley, we talked about a really good movie this week. Are you ready to talk about two that maybe don't hold up as well?
I am not ready.
I am so ready. Everyone always says they're going to do this, and I've never seen anyone do it. As far as I know, in my sphere of podcasts that I listen to, we are the first two people to actually do episodes on this that I am aware of.
I'm excited.
I'm very excited. This is we have two planned things for the year that everyone talks about, and I've never seen an episode done. And this is the first one. I'm very excited. So Bradley, let's run our socials so that we can go mentally prepare ourselves. Thank you for listening to Gold Squadron Gaze. Did Charles fuck something up? Email us at goldsquadrongaze@gmail.com and let us know. You can follow us on BlueSky, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Gold Squadron Gaze. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Gold Squadron Gaze, where we post full episodes of this podcast. If you like the podcast, you can also rate us and review us on your favorite podcast app of choice. Please join us next week and every week for another episode of Gold Squadron Gaze.
Is that legal?
Nope, I don't think so. I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think it is.